Shooters and reloaders out there, Fortune Cookie 45 LLC coming to you from the hot lead zone. And first of all, I'd like to say hi to my grandsons Malcolm and Kai, because they're growing up so fast it's like they're on warp speed. These of course are Glocks. They happen to be a Glock 19 on the right and a Glock 34 on the left. And the title of this video is Critical Understanding of the Glock Trigger. Now how is this possible that 30 years have gone by with Glock pistols all over the place and someone comes out and says we need critical understanding of the Glock trigger? How many Glock triggers have been pulled over the last 30 years where we have to come out with a video like this? Well, you've probably figured out by now that there are two basic precepts in the Hot Lead Zone videos on this channel. And number one is that the subject matter and the technology of our shooting sports and shooting endeavors is limitless. The second precept of the Hot Lead Zone videos is that we're going to present stuff that you will not see in any other YouTube videos. And in fact, you might not see anywhere. Now how's that possible? Take the Glock for instance, it's been around for 30 years. You would think that with everything that's been done with Glock pistols that there's nothing new that you can say about it. Well, here it goes, and this is actually critical understanding of the Glock trigger. So let's just use our SIG here to show how things were in the past with triggers. The single action trigger. You've been taught, well, when you shoot a gun, you have the gun ready to fire and you take up the trigger and then you just apply pressure and you squeeze, 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 hold the sights on target, squeeze, 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 and you're putting pressure, more pressure, and then the gun goes off in a surprise break. That's the way we were taught to shoot, right? And if you do that with a Glock, you are going to be going right against the design parameters of the Glock, and that's why we need to critically understand the Glock trigger. It's not like this at all. Now perhaps you've already come to understand about the Glock trigger, but you really don't know what you understand, you just know what you know. Well, let's go ahead and get right into the understanding of the Glock trigger. This is not a static trigger that's intended to be squeeze, squeeze, squeeze with partial pressure. Partial pressure will cause accidental discharges. Now whether you're covering suspects or whether you're covering enemy soldiers, this kind of thing, partial pressure is going to get accidental discharges because this is not a partial pressure trigger. The Glock trigger is designed for continuous press commitment trigger. Now we can talk all we want about finger on the trigger, releasing the safety lever, taking up the slack on the trigger and all that kind of thing, but Glock designed all that to be seamless. There's no thought involved in all that. The design is, if you need to shoot and the stress is high and the bullets are flying, you simply press. That's the way the trigger was designed to work. Hold the sights on target and press. The reason this is so is because you don't know where the break is in there. So if you try and apply partial pressure, you don't know how much it's going to go off. It'll find you. You can't find it. So if you're going to search for it, you can't safely. What you do is you just go ahead and when you need to shoot, you press. That's it. Simple. So if you're at the range and you're just shooting your Glock for the first time, or whether you're a seasoned trooper that is at the range, if you're doing anything else but this, you are in trouble with this pistol. Because when the stress levels are high, that's what you need. You don't need any kind of partial pressure. So the critical understanding of the Glock trigger is, it is not a partial pressure trigger. It is a commitment trigger. And when you're ready to shoot, you just press. And that break will find you. You won't find it. And that leads to accurate shooting. Back in the 1980s, a lot of 1911 shooters who were used to the single action partial pressure trigger of the 1911 could not make the transition to the Glocks because of the Glock continuous pressure full commitment trigger. How many times did you hear people complain, I can't shoot the Glock trigger, or I hate the Glock trigger? Well, why is because they couldn't get past the concept. Now in law enforcement, they've actually had some accidental discharges, even with cases where suspects were being held down on the ground and another cop was actually covering the suspect, but accidental discharges would happen, and the reason why was because of partial pressure on the Glock triggers. So that now you'll see a lot of training to keep the trigger finger like this until they're ready to shoot, or they have to shoot. Not even getting the finger close to the trigger. Because again, partial pressure is a problem when it comes to a stress situation. Now I know we can't show this with a two-hand hold, but I'll just take this hand away. If you're at the range, this is what you want. When you're ready to shoot, that's the shot. Now we're not talking about a jerk like this, but rather we're talking about a smooth, continuous press of a trigger that keeps moving and it goes off. That's the full understanding of the Glock trigger. Bye for now.